Listen to me, I'm speechless. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, we can begin by thinking something that we haven't been able to think very much of heretofore, and that's going on offense. The kind of victories that have been won in these elections on paper would tell us that we're poised to undo gun laws that have been put on the books. And one of the most ready-at-hand tools that we have is legislation that's been introduced into the Congress by Senator John Cornyn of Texas and Marlon Stutzman, a representative from Indiana. And it would basically, and we've talked about this before, it would say that just as you can take your driver's license from your state of residence and drive anywhere in the country without having to get any other licenses whatsoever, you may have to be sure you're paying attention to different speed laws that they have or a few little differences like that. But basically, it's the same, and you don't need another permit. You don't need another license. Well, the same should be the case with your concealed carry permit, or in the case of those happy states that don't require one, that your driver's license then would be good enough. So if you're driving somewhere with your Arizona driver's license and your concealed carry firearm becomes an issue, once it's known that, oh, so you've got an Arizona driver's license. Okay, fine. Have a good day, sir. That's the way it should be handled, really, among all 50 states. It'll take us a little while to get to all 50, but I think it is going to explode some heads when I can just see now a convention that would bring, for whatever reason, people from different constitutional carry states in the country, Arizona certainly being one, Alaska, whatever. There's 5.5 of them if you count the unincorporated parts of Montana.
Right.
And all of a sudden, New York City, the crime could go down because it's known that there's a whole bunch of folks from out of town where they can carry their gun wherever they bloody well want.
Yeah, that's Larry Pratt, the executive director, ladies and gentlemen, of the Gun Owners of America, a great friend of this program. And, of course, talking about national reciprocity, we're going to bring in a great friend of yours, too, and that's David Codrea, who's going to jump in this conversation with us for the hour, Larry. We're just going to bat these topics around for the next hour because so much has happened. David, welcome in, brother. Always a pleasure to have you here.
I am so tired of Larry Pratt always being right, But it's absolutely.
But I don't get tired of hearing you say that. Thank you.
No fight is won strictly being on the defensive because the guy's going to get some in. You have to be able to strike back, and you have to be able to take the initiative yourself, and that's absolutely right. Let's put the Bloombergians on the defense for a change.
Yeah, we won, they lost, so let's act like that is what really happened.
I got to tell you guys, this is a conversation I want to have with these two brilliant minds, both of you, on the program at the same time. Larry, I'll start with you. I had always, and I'm always confident, we always say freedom will prevail. I believe that. It's at the core of my being. Freedom will prevail. It can be a long, hard fight, as you know, but it will always prevail in the end. I believe that with all of my soul. We just witnessed a U.S. president seize power from Congress. It doesn't seem to upset the Democrats because they don't care, because they're too stupid to think that maybe somebody might do it to them one day because they agree with the tyrant that seized power.
Right.
Does that not concern you?
I think the genie may be out of the bottle. When Harry Reid went for the nuclear option for the appointment of judges, and particularly to the D.C. Circuit of the federal system, that's kind of like the next step before the Supreme Court. And if you've got a bunch of Looney Tunes on that bench, then things go to the Supreme Court with a different cast to them than if they were being ruled upon by people that had some genuine respect for the Constitution, and in particular the Second Amendment. So we saw a major coup occur when Harry Reid changed the rules of the Senate to allow his narrow majority of Democrats to all of a sudden start loading up the D.C. Circuit Court. Now, supposedly, that rules change for the lower threshold for getting a vote, a lower majority, a simple majority, if you will, that only applied to judges not including the Supreme Court and not including cabinet appointees. Well, That's what they said at that moment. But frankly, the genie's out of the bottle. And at this point, although I have been taught by some of the best, in fact, one of them works for us, Michael Hammond, a guy that understands the old rules of the Senate and stopped more bad legislation, including anti-Second Amendment legislation, by using those rules of the Senate to slow things down until finally bad stuff just would die. They'd have to move on and do other things. Well, it's not going to be that simple now. And Harry Reid has said that, okay, a simple majority now is enough to get things done in the Senate. Well, guess what, Harry? The incoming Republicans have a majority, and they could just as easily vote a rules change that a Supreme Court justice could be affirmed on a majority, simple majority vote, or that any of these other things could be done in the same fashion. So he's made a bed, and thanks to the voters speaking the way they did earlier this month, he's probably going to have to lie down in the bed that he made.
Barack Obama has made it clear he doesn't give a damn about the separation of powers in this country. He doesn't care. We saw that. We witnessed it. It was unbelievable. But he also heard those who didn't vote above those who did vote. The man suffers from delusions. What we're witnessing, green is red, up is down, left is right anymore. David.
Well, the problem even with lower courts, okay, so fine. So the Supreme Court is still a supermajority. But the lower courts can do a lot of damage. I mean, we're fighting rulings right now that says that shall issue with all kinds of absurd restrictions that might as well make it no issue is perfectly constitutional. And all the Supreme Court has to do is nothing, and that stays the law in the jurisdiction where it's been ruled on, and it's used by other circuits and things like that for precedents and other appeals courts as well. So it's tremendously dangerous. And, yeah, I'm with Larry. I'm absolutely interested to see if the Republicans are going to continue to, first of all, leave that nuclear option on the table for them to use now that they have the majority. But the other thing I'm waiting to see the Republicans do is develop some guts, because they got out of town. They say it's too soon to talk about anything yet, and plus we don't want to talk about impeachment.
Larry, what's the membership of the GOA up to right now?
Well, when you count in the enormous boost that we obtained from our good friend Piers Morgan, we are now approaching some 1 million folks that we can mobilize in the defense of our Second Amendment freedoms. Well, we don't owe it all, but we owe so much of it to Piers Morgan.
Yeah, he was the gift that keeps on giving, wasn't he? All you got to do is mention his name, and it ruffles a lot of feathers. But you and I talked about my anger at gun owners when I said I spoke or emceed the Georgia Carry event. 10,000 members of Georgia Carry, and I reminded you that Georgia Carry had changed law in Georgia. Decades and decades of terrible firearms law, right? In less than 4 years, and made Georgia one of the top 5 states in the country for gun ownership and concealed carry and even open carry for that matter in 5 years. But when I emceed that event, the room was filled. You spoke at the event a couple years ago. 10,000 members, 700 people in the room. Why isn't it 10,000 in the room, and why don't we have to go to Phillips Arena? That's my question. That's what angers me. Larry's got 1 million people now. Congrats on that at the GOA. Why isn't it 10 million? David, your theory on that?
Exactly right, and it comes back to apathy. Look, when I spoke at the last Gun Rights Policy Conference, I was quite pleased that we had a full room despite all the air traffic control problems with the fire that was set at the FAA satellite station. My question is, how come we're not filling a stadium? I used to live in Los Angeles, and I was a big part of the NRA Members Council out there in West Side Los Angeles. We were lucky to get a couple dozen people to come to a meeting. We would have the Great Western Gun Show, biggest show west of the Mississippi. We'd have 7 miles of dealer tables. 40,000 people would show up at the Pomona Fairgrounds. Yet when we tried to do a counter-protest against the Brady's in Westwood, we were lucky to get a couple hundred people to show up. And, Mark, we could go on with story after story after story about this. And, yeah, you're absolutely right. Why isn't it 10 million members of GOA? I don't get it. So,
all right, that's a great.
Let me say something in defense of some of our gun owner friends, because I can make the same complaints that you all have been making, and I think there's a lot to that. But we saw something really interesting in Connecticut this last year, the year we're still in, when we think maybe 300,000 folks that had already had to register their firearms once refused to register them again, refused to register anew their magazines of whatever they can hold, I guess, more than 7 rounds. I think that's their nutty limit, whatever. And they said no. We're just not going to play. And that put a very anti-gun governor who won re-election in Connecticut on a collision course with these gun owners. And who's going to blink? Is the governor going to start arresting people? And if they start arresting people, is one of the arrestees going to say, gee, my great-great-grandfather was at Lexington, you're here now, boom.
You know, that is we have discussed that on this program many, many times, Larry, and you bring up a topic we could take into the third hour of this show on Connecticut alone. Let's start with who's going to blink first, because obviously we're looking at a form of civil disobedience. Obviously, the governor really, my theory, I don't think he believes in the law. He believes in looking like he believes in the law because he has his own personal political agenda that he aspires to.
And I don't think he thought that people were going to risk a felony conviction, denying them the right to keep and bear arms, in many cases for life. And so he thought he was going to get away with it. It didn't mean anything to him, like you're saying. It's no big deal, just a lot of words. So why do these guys get so upset about it? Well, he's about to find out.
Yeah, I'm afraid he is. David, Connecticut, you spoke there at an event. Was it Connecticut Carry that you talked to?
It was Connecticut Citizens Defense
Connecticut
League.
Citizens Defense League.
But
okay.
I also have good relations with Connecticut Carry, and one of the observations I made there was, again, if more people were members of these state groups, would the law have passed in the first place? And I'm talking about being active members. I'm talking about not just being the annual dues member, but I'm talking about responding to the alerts. I'm talking about writing to the legislators. I'm talking about writing letters to the editor. I'm talking about putting up yard signs. I'm talking about everything that it takes to make it happen. And I wonder how many gun owners are in Connecticut and how many gun owners actually voted, and also how many gun owners are members of either CCDL or Connecticut Carry.
Well, you know, here's the thing, and that's an interesting question, because we know that gun owners as a voting bloc, Larry, I know you'll agree with me on this, are probably the most active. We just witnessed Barack Obama seize congressional power. It doesn't seem to bother the Democrats who had their power seized. They don't seem to give a crap.
Right.
They're going to, over the next few years, I think they're going to get a slap upside the head with the Constitution. But it doesn't bother this president being lawless. Let's take gun control now to the national level. Let's take what happened in Connecticut to the national level. This segment of Armed American Radio is being brought to you by the Gun Owners of America, America's no-compromise gun lobby. Become a member today. Visit gunowners.org. Join them, folks. I did. Welcome back. I say it every week. If you're not a member, why aren't you a member? I also tell you it's never been more important than it is now. And with the power grab we've seen from America's tyrant over the past week, I am at a loss, and I have studied this. I have looked at this. I have gone back through quotes, previous shows. I've researched online as much as I could find. I've read what he said about the unconstitutionality of what he did in years preceding what he did. And my question is a legitimate one based on everything that I've found, and that is, what is stopping him from acting now in the same fashion? Because we all know that he believes Congress has waited too long for background checks. We have Michael Bloomberg spending hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars in states across the country to enact those background checks that 90% of you support. And we tie it in with the actions that we just saw. That is a fear of mine. And Larry, I want to go back to, let's use Connecticut and let's set this as a bigger stage. Does Barack Obama think that Americans will follow a decree like that if he were to do it? Because I believe nothing is stopping him from doing it now that he's done it once.
You would think that he might have taken notice of what happened in Bunkerville, Nevada. This was the Bundy Ranch where the federales, the BLM, was alleging that he was in arrears on range fees.
Right.
And Bundy had his arguments, which I happen to agree with, that he didn't know them. But the fact is they went in to collect a debt with a SWAT team.
Right.
And that is where the government went overboard.
A federal SWAT team.
A federal SWAT team of the BLM. This was something where we found out that America is still alive, that there is still that, probably a minority, as it was in the time of our war for independence, when people are willing to stand up and, if need be, fight against tyrannical power. The whole purpose of the Second Amendment is not so that you and I can go target practicing, not even so that you and I can pack a piece to pop a perp out on the street, good as that might be. The Second Amendment is there to keep rascals like the President of the United States from thinking that he has no limits, that he can go anywhere as far as he wants. And you would think that he might have learned that lesson from the, if you will, the Battle of Bunkerville, where the feds finally stood down. And I'm sure I've reported this, but Richie Mack, former sheriff from Arizona, Graham County, had actually seen the looming confrontation where the cattle were penned up in a corral. Ranchers, mostly men but some women, all unarmed, were riding toward the corral to let the cattle go, and BLM agents and probably some others had their fingers on triggers and their guns aimed at the ranchers. And it wasn't until a deputy of a rather feckless sheriff of Clark County, the deputy took matters directly to the BLM and said, "Do you want to be known as the men who have gunned down unarmed men and women?" And it was that apparently that got through that what they were about to do was something horrible. It was morally obnoxious. It was constitutionally outrageous. And they stood down at that point. Now, I don't know that the president got it. He probably feels that he was betrayed.
Larry, I have to remind you that we are talking about a man who doesn't see the reality of what happened on November 4th. He sees the majority who didn't vote, but he doesn't see the historic whooping he took at the polls. Why?
And you know what? If the Republican leadership doesn't agree to cut his money for various programs that need to be cut out, okay, if they're not going to impeach, and that doesn't make me all that happy, at least I understand their arguments, but hey, Republicans, you were elected to stop Barack Hussein Obama. And if you're not going to impeach, which means you could actually put him in the pokey upon Senate conviction, they have one up on Capitol Hill. But anyway, they can cut the money off so that the guy can't keep pushing. We learned within the last couple weeks that what we thought had been put on the shelf at least, if not totally disbanded, is still underway. Operation Choke Point. There's a gun store that was getting ready to hit the decks, open the doors, do business. They couldn't get an inventory loan. Operation Choke Point is still alive and well and at work. So this president has not given up trying to do what he can to batter the Second Amendment, and he wants to obviously deprive the people of the means of carrying out what the Second Amendment is all about.
Larry, great response. David, I have to go to you on this now. What great place to stop again. David, based on what we saw happen during the elections on November 4th, we saw just a complete annihilation of Barack Obama and his agenda. He doesn't think so. He hears the people that didn't vote. That's the people he believes that the majority of the people who didn't vote agree with him. So he feels he still has a mandate, as delusional and psychotic as this is. But he believes it. We saw evidence of that when he literally flipped off the American electorate and just violated the Constitution as if it didn't exist. So my question is, done once, my fear is, what's to stop him when he feels Congress didn't act again, which we already know. I quoted him in the previous segments, how he feels Congress hasn't done enough on this subject. Once a tyrant, always a tyrant. It's not going to change. There's nothing stopping him now, unless what? What does, you got to tell me here. I want to get this out. This needs to be talked about.
Yeah, it beats me because, when Andrew Johnson was impeached, basically it was for trying to replace his Secretary of War. Congress had enacted this Tenure of Office Act saying that a president couldn't remove an office holder without advice and consent from Congress. And because Johnson went ahead and did that because he had different ideas about Reconstruction than the people who wanted to punish the South, that's what set the wheels in motion for that. So at one point in time, Congress was perfectly willing. In this particular case, and again, Mark, there's nothing to stop him except overreach. And I think why we saw it happen on immigration is because it is a reasonably safe topic for him as far as the Republican establishment is concerned. And one of the things I'm going to do, and I told you about it today when we were talking offline, cussing and wishing we were on Sirius Radio for it, is that Scott Walker, okay, you take a look at the Wisconsin governor. He is, from all intents and purposes, from a gun owner's perspective, a very good governor, but he is for a pathway to citizenship. And now he is being pushed by those in the Republican establishment trying to do that. And when we come back, I want to talk to Larry about this, because Gun Owners of America is the only national organization out there warning that we are going to lose all of our legislative and judicial goals if millions of illegal aliens get that pathway to citizenship.
Yeah, that is his ultimate, that is the ultimate goal of the pathway to citizenship. Larry, it's always a pleasure to have you here and to have two great minds, you and David, together in this hour. David was looking forward to talking with you as well. Welcome back to the show, Larry. A pleasure.
It's great to be with you guys. Thank you so much for what you're doing every week.
And I'll tell you what, we're never going to let up. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm very concerned about what we saw happen. David Codrea, welcome back. War on Guns, davidcodrea.com. I want you to go ahead and pick up that conversation and take it off from there.
Well, the bottom line is, what I said before the break, that Gun Owners of America is the only national gun rights organization sounding the alarm that the pathway to citizenship is going to create millions of new Democrats. And we see from the Democrat Party platform that what they want to do is they want to have the background check, which is really the means to registration and confiscation. They want to ban so-called assault weapons. They want to end the non-existent gun show loophole. And the Democrats are, I'm sorry, as flawed as the Republicans are, the Democrats are the party of gun control. And to allow millions of new Democrats to come in and become voters, and every credible poll says they will become Democrats, is just suicide. It's what a friend of mine calls cultural terraforming, and we might not notice it today, we might not notice it tomorrow, but 10, 20 years down the road, look to all the legislative and judicial gains to be set back.
This was their ultimate goal. This is what the agenda is designed to do. And when you combine that with what we saw last Thursday, when you combine that with his deep hatred towards guns and his propensity to give us common sense gun registration schemes and background checks, what do you think about the immigration?
This is something that we have seen, and we have been telling anybody who will listen. This is not something born out of human compassion. The president doesn't care about these people, except as polling indicates that some 85% of them will vote Democrat. And at the national level, that means anti-Second Amendment. And so, David, my only disagreement with anything I've heard you say is I don't think it would be 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
It would be so fast, because these guys, when they think they have the ball, they go for the goal. It's really, we are dealing with a determined enemy, and we don't have a determined ally in Senate Leader Mitch McConnell or House Leader John Boehner. These men are not fighters. They haven't distinguished themselves as willing to fight. They want to make deals. They want to make nice. They want to go out and play golf with the other side. And I'm sorry, you may want to go play golf with them. We want you to stop them. That was the message of this election. And when you hear Boehner talk about, well, the message of this election was, we'll try to work it out so we can work together with them, because they weren't willing to work with us before. Now, we don't want you to work with them. We want you to.
They weren't willing to work. No, it's compromise. Listen, I am finding it very difficult to believe, Larry and David, that the Republican Party would be stupid enough at this stage of the game, with everything they know, with this complete lack of respect for the U.S. Constitution, the rule of law, and the complete, utter trashing and violation of his oath to uphold the laws, his seizing of congressional power. I can't believe the Republican, even the establishment Republican, and that's a bold statement, David, would be that stupid to say, well, you know what, we're going to go back to the majority, we're going to eliminate the nuclear option, we're going to play nice, we're going to allow the Democrats to do everything they didn't allow us to do, we're going to get this back on track. Do they not understand the nature of the enemy they're dealing with, David?
I think that their constituents, for instance, I mentioned Scott Walker. One of his big constituencies is agriculture, dependent on the low-cost labor to turn their profits. And we saw the Republican establishment savage the Tea Party candidates more cruelly and more viciously than they would ever go after any Democrats. And now they're in, and this is still part of their agenda. They're going to mask it, and whether or not they're stupid or not, I sometimes wonder whether or not they're compromised.
Larry, your thoughts?
A friend of mine who's been involved in Washington for decades says that, well, there are two parties. There's the evil party, the Democrats, and the stupid party, the Republicans. And they are conflicted. It is true that they understand that there's a base that brings in the votes, and that's the folks like us. But they also see that they get a lot of their money from corporate America, and that the whole notion of crony capitalism does not exist only on the Democrat side of the political divide. There are plenty of Republicans that just love jumping into the deep end of the trough and telling us to keep on filling it up with their favorite swill. So we got our hands full. We have two lobbying objectives, I would say. One is to get the stupid party to act like it has a brain and that it has a backbone, and then to go fight and to go do what we elected them to do. I think they're really still having trouble processing the fact that we're going to have to fight. Really?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point, and it scares me. It concerns me a little bit as well. It was a clear mandate. The trouncing they took was historic at all levels. So I've got to believe that he sees that, and I'm hoping, I guess, really for any success to come of this from the stupid party, as you say, side, is that they not only see it, but they act on it. That they act on it, and they stop trying to play nice, David. I think that's the only way it's going to happen.
I come back to the Carroll Quigley quote from Tragedy and Hope. Okay, he was a professor. He was a real influence on Bill Clinton. And he said the argument that two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one of the right and the other of the left, is foolish and doctrinaire. The two parties should be almost identical so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extreme shifts in policy. And I think that we see that with the establishment.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Armed American Radio Network. Larry Pratt, GOA, gunowners.org, gunowners.org. Get off your duff and join. Become one of the million members who are required now to make a difference in the face of tyrannical activity by a president who literally can't stand you and thinks you're a fool. Join gunowners.org.
The tyrants did it. Hitler took the guns. Stalin took the guns. Mao took the guns. Fidel Castro took the guns. Hugo Chavez took the guns. And I'm here to tell you, 1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms. Doesn't matter how many lemmings you get out there on the street begging for them to have their guns taken. We will not relinquish them. Do you understand? And that's why you're going to fail, and the establishment knows no matter how much propaganda, the Republic will rise again when you attempt to take our guns.
The Bill of Rights protects every American's God-given right to keep and bear arms. Now that right is being seriously undermined as legally registered rifles are being confiscated in some parts of our country. If we're not careful, we may find ourselves with no right to own guns, and that's where Gun Owners of America comes in. Gun Owners of America is in Washington every day fighting for you to keep that right. Congressman Ron Paul has called GOA the only no-compromise gun lobby in Washington. You need to be part of this great grassroots group of activists who are keeping the heat on their members of Congress. Find out right now how you can join. Call 888-886-GUNS and get started receiving their fact-filled newsletters and action alerts. Call 888-886-GUNS or go to their webpage at gunowners.org and help make your voice heard in Washington. Make that call right now and call Gun Owners of America at 888-886-GUNS. Remember, it's not just about gun control, it's about control.